Welcome to the Product Quest podcast. Thank you for joining us on our journey to better understand innovation and product strategy. My name is Jan Vermut, and joining me as always are my co-hosts Scott Burleson and Jonathan Edwards. Today we are delighted to have a special guest join us as well to talk about how she discovered jobs to be done and how she's applying it to a surprising and extraordinary field, the art world. Ruth Hartt, a very warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I love geeking out over jobs to be done theory, so I'm really excited about this.
Good. So you're in the right place, I think. You're in the right place for that. Ruth, I mean, I mentioned it. I mentioned the art world and so on. Probably it would be good if you could kind of give us an idea of how you've been living in that and give us a little bit of a background about yourself and how you've been living and breathing, as it were, in the art world space. So what do we have to imagine?
Sure. So for the first 17 years of my career, I was in the music world. I was an opera singer and a music educator. And so I performed with opera companies. I soloed with orchestras and choirs. I conducted high school choruses and church choirs. I directed musical theater productions. Basically, you name it, I've done it. I'm a pianist, so I played in pit orchestras. I've accompanied choirs. I was fully embedded in that world for many, many years.
That's nice. Was that always the case?
I grew up in a very musical family. And so it was just part of my life from very young. I think I started piano lessons when I was 5. So I've been doing music a very long time. This brings about some bad memories. I tried playing the piano, but I'm so bad at it, I can tell you. But I love listening to music. So I'm not a producer. Okay, so I discovered on your website, on your personal website, I thought this was just a very nice sentence. You put it there and you say, I believe music has the power to heal, unite, and inspire. Could you elaborate a little bit on that and what that means? Yeah, and I think it's a good way to start would be to share a bit of my own experience. So I grew up in rural Maine in a blue collar family, and it was a really narrow world. There were limited options, minimal social capital, but my parents, thank God, they recognized my musical inclinations at a very young age, and they enrolled me in piano lessons when I was 5. And I had this terrifying teacher, this spinster piano teacher named Miss White, but playing piano, it really became a crucial outlet for me personally, an outlet for expression, a source of pride and accomplishment. It cultivated my confidence, and the music itself, transported me, at least in my mind, to other worlds, and I got to sing in the Maine All-State Chorus. That really broadened my horizons. We had 3 incredible guest conductors who led these most amazing rehearsals. And I really had a front row seat to these priceless demonstrations of inspired leadership and charismatic teaching. So, music really transformed my own life. And I can't imagine, what it would have been without it. So, of course, when I enrolled in college, I was a music education major. That just made sense to me, And when I became a music teacher myself, I got to see this transformative power in my own students. I had a student with autism who had no social connections at school come into chorus at the beginning of the year, not giving eye contact, not really showing emotion. And at the end of the year, he was, high-fiving his chorus buddies and grinning. And another student who started as a freshman, and she was painfully shy, but she ended up as a senior being voted chorus president and singing the most incredible solo at one of our concerts. So, and I think, as a performer, I've seen the healing aspect of music as well. When I see an audience member brought to tears by a piece of music, and they're able to sort of process some deep emotion that they didn't realize they needed to process, and not to mention the health benefits too. I mean, research has shown that music can decrease anxiety and reduce blood pressure and help with pain management, and the list goes on and on. And when it comes to inspiring, I read this really neat article about how researchers have found that the feeling of awe that comes from experiencing something incredible in the arts, it can really lead to a shift in perception for somebody. It can open them up, and it can make them feel expanded and as if they're part of something larger. And I think that's why, as a society, we use music to bring people together when we're celebrating or when we're mourning. It's something that it's just, there's so many uses for music, and it's just such a powerful tool.
Ah, that's nice. We were just talking about it with Scott prior to this. It makes me think of the conversation where, like, somehow listening to music by yourself, that has kind of one kind of job, but listening to music with others, that's kind of a whole different story. It kind of addresses another need or another job that you, in some sense at least, or at least that's what you're also saying, right? In a sense.
It really does. I think it really makes you feel like you're part of something, which I think is such an important thing for a human to feel.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. Nice. So, I mean, we mentioned it before, and we kind of have to find our way through jobs to be done. There is a very, very clear and straightforward path, but maybe could you elaborate a little bit on how you found jobs to be done, and how you touched upon this, or how this worked?
Yes. So I landed a job at the Christensen Institute, the Clayton Christensen Institute, in 2017, after making the decision to transition out of the music world. Part of it was I had an encounter with pregnancy discrimination that left me a little bit jaded with the arts sector. And I thought, I just got to find a job that pays the bills. But what I discovered was, what I found at the Institute was what I like to call my MBA boot camp. Embarrassingly, I never heard of Clayton Christensen before, and I don't think many people in the music world have. But I discovered, okay, so he's this world-renowned business thinker. He's a best-selling author, and he's formulated these really powerful theories that have changed the business world. I should probably learn these theories. I should probably start reading these books. And so, I read The Innovator Solution and Competing Against Luck. And at the Institute, what researchers do at the Institute is we're taking these powerful theory frameworks and we're applying them to pressing issues in the social sector. So we're trying to help leaders see problems in a new way. And we're, with the goal of, helping to transform education and healthcare and poverty. So my role at the Institute was really, helping with operations and management and human resources. And then as I became familiar with the theories, I started to realize, hey, wait a second, these theories, we've got this problem in the arts sector that maybe these theories could help with. We've got this problem of audience decline. I wonder if these could help. So it really sparked an interest in me in applying these ideas. And I started reading and writing, and that's what sort of brought this blog about that I've been writing in for almost a year now. It just sparked this sort of passion project for me. And I think with Jobs to be Done, it's a counterintuitive way of looking at the world. But once you get it, it just makes so much sense, right? Everything looks different, right? It completely changes the way you think about the world. And that really got me excited about, maybe this will help create change in the arts sector.
Okay, I would really love to get into this in more detail, kind of how you brought these two together. You mentioned it's a kind of counterintuitive way of looking at stuff. Can you what does that mean?
Well, I think in today's world, it's all about data mining. We're trying to get all of this data about our potential customers, and we're mining through it. We're combing through it to try to figure out, how do we get people to buy our products? But the problem is, demographic data doesn't provide the context that we need, right? So it doesn't get to the bottom of why people buy, because people aren't motivated to make a purchase decision because of their age or their ethnicity or their income bracket or their family size. They're motivated to make a purchase because of a struggle they're facing in their life. And so they hire a product or they bring it into their lives to help them with that struggle, to help them make progress. So when you look at it that way, it's really an eye-opening moment. I think for me, when I started to think about the arts sector, we have it all backwards in the arts sector, right?
What do you mean? In what sense?
I like to use the word egocentric when I talk about arts sector marketing, because so I actually this month I actually looked through about 180 arts sector websites because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't that I was right. Like I know I've seen this everywhere, but like, have I really, are there any arts organizations that
you were doing the research, as it were?
Yeah, exactly. So one of my most popular blogs is entitled 10 Signs Your Arts Organization is Egocentric. So what I see in the arts world is when you go to these websites, you see a giant photo of the conductor on the homepage or a picture of the orchestra. You don't see the audience. And when you read the copy is focused on what show is coming up next, how beautiful the music is, how talented the musicians are. And here's where you buy a ticket, or here's how you can support us by donating. But there's nothing about how these offerings could help a consumer or transform their life. And, all of these people are wearing tuxedos and gowns, and that's, not what consumers are familiar with on an everyday basis. And I think what I realized is you start to compare this traditional arts marketing to marketing in other sectors, and you start to notice how much this approach just ignores the customer. That it got me really riled up because you think about your favorite TV commercial or your favorite social media campaign, and the most successful ads that you see are centering around the customer story, and they look so different from a typical orchestra ad. They're using, the customer's own words. They're using imagery and stories that are familiar and relatable, and they're doing that because it works. Because when your marketing lines up with how people interact with their own world, they're much more inclined to buy in.
I think that is a very powerful breakthrough. What's also interesting is that I've often said, no matter what business somebody is in, they become a little myopic or obsessed with their own products, their own technology. And then in your immersion in the art world or in the music world, you're describing the same phenomenon where we become in love with ourselves, and yet a few minutes ago when we were talking about what are some of the jobs that music can do, one of the ones that came was what helps us to connect with people. And and you think about why would I attend a concert as opposed to just watch one? Well, one reason is I'm connecting with all these random people, that we have something in common. What's in common? That we're enjoying a shared experience. And if we talked through it a lot more, we could probably connect with people. We could probably come up with some other jobs that they're there to accomplish. And so that the fact that you made that connection is just, it's just amazing. It's amazing. What's amazing how it's this music as a solution is similar to all the other solutions that we have, and this with the same faults that as marketers and product developers that we would have.
Well, and that's why I say it's so counterintuitive, because you're so immersed in that world. Arts, people in the arts have been, like, I have been, playing piano since the age of 5. That's all. It's not all they know, but they know that world so well, and it's hard to take off those lenses and see their world from the outsider's perspective, which I think is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so nice also. It's for me, it's the same when we think about companies, right? Mm-hmm. On the one hand, it's so obvious that we should be thinking much more about the customer, but at the same time, we tend to so easily forget about them. And somehow you're describing the same in the arts world, in the music world, where it's so obvious that if you are in an opera, there has to be an opera there, or an audience there, or otherwise, who you're playing for. But still, we forget about it. So it's crazy, kind of how easily we get egocentric or ego focused. I like really that expression. So it's really about this, because it's not about me. Neither in music nor probably in the business. It's about helping other people.
Yeah, and I think it's so hard for so many artists and arts administrators. They sort of put their art up on a pedestal, and they really believe, classical music is the highest form of art. Yeah. Okay, maybe it is, but our audiences have declined by 50% since 1997. Only 8.6% of US adults attend live classical music performances. So when we run out of these loyals, these connoisseurs of the highest art form, who's going to be left? It's a real problem unless we change something, right? Hopefully, we will have a new cohort of audiences who used to be outsiders, who we were able to get inside our doors by marketing with relevance and empathy, using these, customer-centric approaches. And, I do have some friends who are, composers or conductors or singers who get a little bit frustrated when I say, we have to be marketing the job, the social connection, the fancy night out, the improvement of our social standing when we go out, all these sort of non-art related reasons. We have to do that. And they get upset with me, but if we don't, what's going to be left, and I talked about earlier how, art can engender awe. And the research tells us when you experience awe, you also experience curiosity. So I think it's entirely possible if we can get people inside these doors, they will experience awe, they will experience curiosity, and that will drive them to become the new loyals, the new connoisseurs, the new super fans who have a deep appreciation for the extraordinary beauty and power that classical music brings to the world. But we have to get them in the door first. That's the biggest problem.
Yeah. You reminded me of, I wish I could remember it, but it was a book. The whole book was about how the brain processes music. And it went, see if this, I'm trying to recall something from years ago, but it was something about part of the enjoyment comes when your brain's trying to anticipate what's coming, which is why a hook works. Like watch why a simple melody that repeats. That's why the most popular songs often are these repetitive things. But and again, I'm not an expert in classical music, but I imagine it seems from the outsider that the higher forms of classical music might have less hooks, if you will, less repeating.
Yes.
Is there as you're looking at music as a product in a way, is that on the table to modify the music, or is it sort of like, no, this is sort of what it would be, and then we almost need to help folks to be able to better appreciate it? Maybe it's similar to like if people don't like the wine, maybe you make it sweeter. I mean, I don't know. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think it actually is a really big topic of conversation in the arts world. Do we dumb down our art to, reach more people? And I actually don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is showing people, we understand your struggle. We understand yours. Let's take the millennial who is connected to their cell phone 24/7, and this noisy world that, constantly they're getting pinged by work and, and news and social media. There's a job to be done there. The technology detox has become more and more popular lately. And that's something that arts can help with. Right. So if we can show them, we can help you with this struggle of being connected to your phone and being so sick of this noise. Come to a classical music concert. You don't have to understand the music. Your job is just to sit there and enjoy being disconnected and unplugged. Right. And see how that can transform you. So I think it's in how we approach the marketing there.
Yeah, I remember
in one of your articles, actually, you mentioned an initiative in Portland called the Classical Uprising. And I think you also talk about some of the barriers people face or fears they might face in attending these classical events. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you could say a bit more about that.
Yeah, Classical Uprising is a group up here in Portland, Maine. And what I love about their mission statement is they talk about how traditional concerts can feel like an ordeal for some people. You have to put your life on hold. You have to put your phone away. You have to sit quietly for 2 hours. Kids aren't usually welcome. There's all these mysterious rules of etiquette. Like, when am I supposed to clap? What am I supposed to wear? And I think those are, Bob Mesta, who wrote Demand Side Sales. He's a huge jobs to be done guy. He talks a lot about how if the anxieties and the obstacles of, hiring this solution or this product outweigh the benefits, people aren't going to do it. They're going to say, that's not for me. I I don't even know where to start. So I think part of our job in the arts world is figuring out what these anxieties and obstacles and barriers are and trying to eliminate them as much as we can. I think having, the California Symphony with Aubrey Bergauer, they decided to allow phone usage in a concert, which is, was unheard of previously. But I think it's a great marketing opportunity because, if people have their phones out, they might be Instagramming the fact that they're at the California Symphony. And guess what?
Of course.
That's free marketing, So, allowing people to bring drinks to their seats and telling them wear whatever you want and clap whenever you want. If you feel inspired, go for it. I think those are some of the ways that we can sort of meet audiences where they are.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest deterrents is kind of feeling stupid.
Yes.
If you feel stupid, you will never go there. You will never do it. And I think that's if you have that fear of I'm going to an opera, then my wife's grandma, she's been invited to go to actually see an opera here in Zurich. And you cannot imagine the fuss beforehand, like what dress should I buy? And then we have to organize a whole day where she chooses a new dress. I mean, it riles her up completely, but in a sense, it's excitement. Okay, that's the nice part of it. But the other hand, it's a sign of it's a place I don't feel comfortable at. I don't know how to behave. So what should I do?
Yeah, and I wrote a blog about how a couple of months ago I walked into a lumber yard because I was trying to buy wood for something.
By accident or
no, on purpose. And okay. I had never been to a lumber yard, and all of a sudden my heart was pounding. I was sweating. I didn't know who to talk to, where to go. It was so uncomfortable. I wasn't dressed the way they were dressed. And I came home and I was like, oh my gosh, that's what it feels like for an outsider to come to an opera or an orchestra concert. And it was so eye-opening, I think, and everybody should try to have that experience because you start to realize we need to make this more welcoming. We've got to change things up.
Yeah. It's really this putting yourself in the customer's perspective. I think that is also something that for some, at least, jobs to be done can really, really help accomplish this. If you really understand the full, I think, or grasp the power of it, it really helps you make that switch and see yourself from the outside. If you actually think about it in depth, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just wanted to go back on a comment you made just a bit earlier. You said that some artists that you talked to pushed back against the idea of, developing let's say, art as a service and developing annex things to the performance itself. I wondered if you could say why they react like this. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they're concerned about dumbing down the art, for one thing. And I think it's just that issue of being so immersed in the world and holding it as such a treasure, and wanting to preserve the traditions around it. I think there's a fear that we're going to really sort of bastardize it in a way, and people are going to come for the wrong reasons. And I think it's such a problematic way of thinking because, U.S. consumers have so little context for the classical music world. And they have context for the pop, for pop singers and for Hollywood movies. But when it comes to classical music, it's just, they don't understand that world. And so so many of the elements of the classical music world that we are familiar with, it's not relevant and familiar to these outsiders. And so it just doesn't work as a marketing feature.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say that I can understand a bit of the reluctance that some of the uniqueness might be in some of the things that are traditions and they've enjoyed, and it's what they appreciated as children and musicians, and even just like what clothes people wear, that once these traditions are changed, that something might be lost. It's one of these, to be like, make, golfers will have different traditions, certain clothes that you wear, like you don't wear blue jeans to play golf, but or you only use certain models of balls or clubs or whatever. I can sympathize with the concern of, I mean, it might not be in the best interest of the long term of making it more popular, but I can appreciate the concern with losing traditions.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, I wrote a blog post about the golf industry. I don't know if you saw that, why you brought it up, but you look at the decline in golf participation, and it actually sort of mimics the decline in classical music audiences, which is fascinating to me. And there is a new approach to golf these days where they are a lot of, new golf ranges have reduced the holes, to like 12 or 6, and they're letting people wear whatever, and they're serving beer and pizza and ice cream on the golf course. They're trying to do what I think the music sector probably needs to do a little of as well, which is fascinating.
I mean, my impression was that golf has become more popular. In my mind, it was a very elitist sport, and now it seems, I get the feeling more and more people play golf, but I'm not an expert on golf, so I wouldn't know for sure.
Yeah, I think they have been able to sort of turn it around recently with some of these changes, which is fascinating.
One of the great about Dr. Christensen's work is he's just given us a language to even, the right answer, it might be to do something to make it a better experience, or it might be just really, it depends on who your market is. You might really be focusing on the traditionalists. Regardless of what the answer is, he's given us a language to have the conversation. He gave us this idea of the non-consumer, right? The person who is, and you can sort of define that as a non-consumer of music or a non-consumer of classical music. And if that's your goal, if it's your goal to really double down on that traditionalist, it's a perfectly valid goal. It just has implications. But if your goal is to grow the pie and target, maybe it's the consumer of music, but the non-consumer of classical music, regardless of what the answer is, he's given us a language we can have the discussion about. And that's sort of, and that it's amazing to me how this terminology seems to work in every business. But regarding Dr. Christensen, he obviously passed a couple years ago, and I'm not sure what his health was over the past decade was. But I assume you got to meet him. What were some of your experiences with him?
I did get to meet him. I was very intimidated. He's very, very tall, and such an intelligent guy. It's not every day you get to rub shoulders with a best-selling author and a world-renowned business thinker. And I came in not knowing much about him, but he was getting phone calls from like ambassadors around the world wanting to get his advice on different things. And so like I said, it was a little intimidating, but I was so grateful I had the chance to meet him and see him in action before he passed away in January of 2020. He would sit in on we have quarterly meetings called Geek Outs, where we all get together and talk about the theories and how we're applying them. And he would sit in the back and then, occasionally drop the most incredible comment that would like change the whole, direction of the conversation. But and I think, at the Institute too, I've got to work alongside these brilliant researchers who many of them work closely with Clay. So they, have, really his ideas are ingrained in their work as well. So I think my jobs to be done thing is very strongly influenced by his approach.
Yeah, I think we kind of all are. There is different kind of, let's say, mavericks or something of jobs to be done, or kind of the giants, let's say, call it jobs to be done. And Christensen, of course, is what a figure. I unfortunately only know him from watching some YouTube videos, but already there you get a sense of his charisma. I feel like how he
such a storyteller, and that was his thing. Yeah. Such an incredible storyteller, and he would love to sit with us around the table telling us these great tales whenever we got together.
Yeah, I might want to go. I just want to get back to one point or two maybe that we mentioned before, because a lot of the discussions we had was also kind of where we said, okay, does the art world needs dumbing down or the golfing or whatever? And my background is in philosophy, and we have the same issue, as it were. I think it's probably golfers, musicians, art lovers, and philosophers lovers are on the same kind of decline, I believe. But I always thought it's not it doesn't have to be a question of dumbing down. And I think there actually jobs to be done can really help. It can also be a kind of a question of, because jobs to be done does not say you have to make it more accessible, but it's rather putting a question of how can you find relevance? right? So I think in there, I mean, if you get the same job done, or if you can show people what jobs music can get done, or philosophy can get done, or other cultural stuff can get done, it becomes the questions of how do I stay relevant and how do I get relevant, which I think is something else than just the dumbing down. Of course, it might have to move a little bit and shake its old traditions, but it's not necessarily, I would say, it's not necessarily a dumbing down kind of thing, because it's an art form in itself. I mean, I don't know how many philosophers you know, but there's really few that are really publicly known and actually have an influence. That used to be different. And one or two maybe worldwide actually achieved this. And it's an art form in itself to actually, I mean, how to do that and actually get relevance.
But yeah, you said it used to be different with philosophers. And actually, this was a question I marked when you were talking previously, where you said, okay, there's been a decline in the past 20 years of 50%, I think you said, you mentioned. I mean, people are not dumber today than they were. I mean, why do you think this is the case? That I don't think so. Anyway, but why would this be the case that there's a decline, in your opinion? I mean, I guess it's difficult to answer necessarily, but.
So I read in an article, Clayton Christensen pinpointed the phonograph as the start of the longest running disruption ever. So, before the phonograph came along, where did we get music? We had to go to a live performance. That was it. We bought a ticket, we went. So all of a sudden the phonograph was invented, and you could suddenly buy a phonograph, buy a record, and listen to music whenever you wanted. And that just, we escalated from there. We had the cassette tapes, the CDs, and then the MP3s, and all of a sudden Napster, Spotify, YouTube. And so I think that disruptive innovation sparked a lot of the decline that we're seeing. I mean, you can go online now and you can listen to pretty much anything for free. And there's so much available. There are so many choices you could make. And I think it has diffused that interest in classical music, because there's just so many options.
Other musics also face this dilemma with, why is it different for classical music specifically than for, I don't know, classic rock or whatever? Maybe that's not very popular these days, but I don't know, some other popular form of music. Why would that target classical music more than another one?
That is a good question. A lot of people point to the fact that, music education has also declined. That may be a factor, where it's just not a part of everyday life. I think back in the 1800s, most homes had a parlor piano and you would get around it, and that would be your entertainment. And so I think it's possible that, that there's been a decline in music education and people just aren't as familiar with it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think I think you said in one article, I don't remember exactly how you formulated it, but you said something around the idea that there are just many different choices nowadays of different types of music. We have a lot of different people. You have access to music from all over the world. So there's, before, as you said, the revolution started with the phonograph, but I think also just the styles of music. I think that would be my opinion. Just we've got the benefit of all the styles that have been invented in the past 100 years, going, pop, the 60s, 70s, disco, rap, techno music. So these are all new forms of music. And I think probably there's a lot of choice, and maybe people choose other things than classical music.
Yeah, and you have a point too. All of these pop stars are in the mainstream media constantly, and I think for some reason, classical music has moved out of that. There used to be NBC used to have an opera company, and they used to put on operas on primetime television in the evenings, and that was something that the American families would sit around and watch. But that has phased out, and you're not seeing these singers and musicians on, at least very often, on late night talk shows and things like that. But that's probably a factor as well.
I think there is kind of a lesson in there that's also in a sense valid for a company. probably the issue is there's a very slow decline. The decline is not that rapid in audience. There's a very slow decline. I think a lot of companies are in the same kind of position. They don't immediately lose 50% of the audience, but it kind of just is trailing off. I know it from the beverage industry, for example, like sugary drinks. They're consumed less and less every year, but it's not a steep decline kind of thing. And there I also believe that jobs to be done can help, because if you just think about the product, you could say, okay, let's try to make even better, in brackets, classical music, and just try to improve it and improve it and improve it. But that won't change the decline of your audience. But if you take a jobs to be done lens, it could broaden up the perspective quite quickly. So it kind of, for me at least, the way I would formulate it is you go a step up in the hierarchy. So you don't just look at, I don't know, to go to the opera, but you ask, okay, what's the job of going to the opera? So you move one step up and up and up, and then you kind of get to stuff like to connect with others, or to be inspired, or to heal, or as however you want to put it. Then we have to figure that out. And suddenly you can realize, if you go one level higher, what other things you might need to do without even changing the product, let's say, or maybe you can get an inspiration of what should an opera look like that addresses these other jobs better than disco, or I have no clue about music, but you see what I mean? So, and I think it's the same is true for companies as well. If you are in that decline and take a step back and have actually look at the job, it probably opens up a lot of new spaces.
Yeah. And I wrote a blog about Opera Australia. Actually, I've written 2 blogs about Opera Australia.
By the way, we should mention it's cultureforhire.com. Is that the blog you're referring
to?
That
is, yes, cultureforhire.com. Okay. Yes, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, Opera Australia stands out to me as a company that, I don't know if they're doing it intentionally or not, but they seem to be using the jobs to be done approach. And if you go to their website, they were the one arts organization website I could find that seemed like they were using a customer-centric approach. And on their website, on their homepage, their headline is "Escape Ordinary." And underneath that, it says "Escape to Another World" under the iconic sales this summer. So they're nowhere on that page do they use the word music or the word opera. They're targeting a very specific job to be done, which is liberation from the unremarkable everyday existence, right? And I think it's a textbook example of how arts marketing should be functioning these days. And there's nothing on that homepage, at least above the fold, about what's the next show, or how to buy a ticket, or how to donate. It's about this idea of, if you go to an opera, you get to get away from the boring humdrum life that you live in. And they think about that in terms of audience experience as well. I know that they sometimes they have costumes out in the lobby where you can actually try them on and, take a photo of yourself in a costume, or that you can actually, they sometimes have actors walking around in costume and you can interact with them. And so it's a whole experience. I know before one of their shows, they offered dancing lessons. I think it was waltzing lessons before an opera that had, featured the waltz. And so, yeah, it's about figuring out how we integrate the whole experience around this particular job to be done. And that's what makes the experience rich and worthwhile for the audience.
Yeah, that's such a nice example. I mean, they must have, it could be that they're doing it intuitively, or somebody really smart in there has figured it out. I don't know.
Yeah.
And actually, you did something I really loved, and I forget the name of I think you mentioned in various articles, but you did this kind of ad for, I think, exactly this kind of idea of escaping the ordinary, where you kind of put together some footage and did a little storyline with a mother who gets a day off, a night out to the opera. And I've got a background in video marketing and making, and that's how I got to Jobs to be Done. So I really loved your approach, because that's exactly the approach that I would have taken also. So and you did it really nicely. And so I just wanted to encourage people to go and check it out in terms of finding ideas for making content. How did you come upon that, and how difficult was it for you to develop this concept?
Yeah, that was so much fun. So I had been seeing a lot of the typical, video ad for an orchestra is it plays orchestral music. It shows the conductor conducting. It shows the orchestra musicians playing. And then it says, our next performance is on such and such a date. Go to our website to buy a ticket. And that's it. That's the formula. And I just got so frustrated with this because for the outsiders who have no context, they're not going to care. This is not going to prompt them to buy a ticket. There's no emotional draw there whatsoever. And so, in competing against luck, one of the ways that Clayton Christensen says you can find a job to be done is to look in your own life. So I look at my own life. I'm a mom, a working mom with a kid. I'm cleaning all the time. I'm cooking. I'm getting him dressed and ready to go to school. That drudgery, it would be nice to have a break from that, and what would that look like? So really, it when you have that job to be done formulated in your own mind, help me escape from the drudgery of everyday life and have a fancy night out. So when I come home, I feel rejuvenated and I can be a better mom and a better wife. It's written itself already, and the hardest part about that project was just finding the right footage. The rest, it just came right together, I just stole footage from a YouTube blogger and, Shutterstock or whatever. But the rest, it just came together. And in that ad, the only thing you hear of the orchestra is them tuning up at the very end of the ad. You never see them. You don't hear orchestral music. So it's that feeling that you get, when you sit down in the seat and you're finally alone and you're finally out and you feel like, okay, now I can just breathe. That was the feeling I wanted to evoke. And it was interesting. I showed it to some of my colleagues at work, and one other mom said, I just teared up. So I think I accomplished that emotional pull that I was looking for.
That's so nice. That's really kind of finding a kind of a pain point in the life of everybody. That's the struggle you're describing, the issue you're describing. That's kind of let's put it in brackets, but it's an almost universal struggle that you have.
Yes.
So, and immediately this idea of how big is my market, it changes. If that's your market, people who want to escape everyday life, that's much bigger than people who like classical music.
Well, and a lot of advice to arts organizations is ignore the young parents because they're not going to have time or money or want to come. Guess what? That's not true. At least in my own life, and a lot of people that I know, there is a market there. You just have to figure out what their struggle is and how to market it, how to show them that you can help with it.
It's so weird. But Scott, you mentioned this before. I think Jobs to Be Done really provides you a language for this. In my mind, we had a project on chocolate. And the jobs you're describing and we're talking about, chocolate does the exact same thing.
Yes.
And it's so crazy. You have this kind of everyday, just pick me up chocolate, which is kind of more the Hershey's, the Snickers and so on. That might be the stuff you listen to on Spotify. But then you have this dark chocolate, much more refined, which is you eat it in the evening. It's much more an escape kind of thing. So it's weird, but it kind of, once you're thinking there's jobs in what humans just want to accomplish, is suddenly those very different things become related, or I don't know.
So you're saying that chocolate is a competitor to classical music concerts?
I would say so, yeah.
I love it.
From a Jobs to Be Done perspective, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
One of the challenges is just music can do so many jobs. You described it, a great one to begin with. But it's almost like my brain sort of blows up a little bit. It's like, I can't, how do I focus on one? And again, and so sometimes when introducing Jobs to Be Done, a common complaint will be, wow, you're really making my market sound very complicated, doing all these things. And I'm like, I'm not making it sound complicated. I'm describing it. You're just because you're not aware of the complexity doesn't make it any simpler. We're undiscovering it. We had a conversation about how chocolate and classical music can compete. We are just now beginning to understand it. But for music, so I have no idea. But when I was like 3 and 4 years old, I used to I listened to John Denver records constantly and play with Legos. Now, what was 3-year-old? It just seemed, but it was something. That's weird already. Okay, it's already weird, for sure.
Well, that's so weird.
But I look back on it, and it's like, what job was being? And now with this language, right? Why was I doing that? It was not just being entertained. there was something comforting. I mean, we could
Yeah.
maybe we need to go to a psychologist to do that.
No,
But,
I'm going. Sorry,
yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead,
I
Scott.
was gonna say, but with music, it's almost like, I mean, I just feel like we're just at the very tip, at the top of the iceberg. We're like a few snowflakes or a sliver of ice at the top of it because of all the things. And it's I've thought about jobs in a lot of markets, but I got to tell you, my brain sort of, I'm almost stopped with all that. I'm almost frozen with all that it can possibly accomplish.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Jonathan?
Yeah, I was just going to reflect based on what you just said, reflecting on this decline of classical music. We were kind of looking for reasons for this, and I think, I mean, one reason is there's many different options, and one thing I find interesting is music. The length of music pieces has really shortened a lot, progressively, but quite a bit. I don't know what the official radio music length is for a track is now. Is what, 2.5 minutes or something like this. I mean, you still had in the, I don't know, 60s or something, you still had tracks that were 10, 15 minutes, and that was fine. Obviously, classical pieces are quite long. And if I look at my life, if I'm doing the dishes or something, then I'm not going to put, a classical piece, because it's just a bit too long for that, maybe. So maybe you'll find something intermediary that'll fit the purpose better or something, if you want to look at it like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then of course there are people who go to 3-hour movies and are fine with sitting in a movie theater for 3 hours, or reading a book for, however long. So yeah.
Or binging a show the whole Sunday.
Yeah, there you go.
That's probably me. So, but okay.
Then there's all the jobs of the performer, the jobs of connecting with your fellow musicians. And I mean, the jobs of, when you're playing, there's something different about playing by yourself, which you probably call practice, but it's actually more than practice because you're enjoying it. But there's something different as soon as there's one more person in the room.
Yes.
It makes all of a sudden everything's different, because you almost feel like you can't just do whatever you want, right? You have to sort of do something so the whole environment changes. But in the jobs, I would say, I just use the term the environment changes. I would say the job somehow changed, where if I'm playing by myself, I'm the a job executor, and then now I have a customer. But I don't know, Ruth, what are your thoughts about the jobs of the performer?
My brain is exploding right now. The jobs of a performer. Well, I'll say myself as an opera singer, for me, I got so much joy and pleasure out of trying to better my technique. And it was sort of an endless pursuit of perfection. There was something really motivating about tackling something so challenging as opera technique, and learning stagecraft and understanding how to pronounce the different languages. There was something about that was so fulfilling for me. I think also, that feeling of connecting with your audiences, when you're out on stage and you're channeling the character that you're portraying, and you're through real emotion, and you can feel the audience connecting with that. And I think that's partly why I've migrated towards marketing, is because it's the same thing in marketing, right? You have to figure out your customers' deepest motivations as opposed to your character's deepest motivations. And then you have to find a way to connect with real emotion to those target audiences, so that they will care, and so that they will, want to learn more. So it's a very similar thing.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I kind of have a suspicion that Scott is mapping out different jobs and scribing everything down. But because it's really, once you start thinking about it, there's really 1,000 different things going on. And
it really is.
I love this, how you describe this almost parallel between being on a stage and then kind of finding a right way of marketing something as a
Yeah, it's, for me, I never really thought I'd find something that I loved as much as singing opera, but I do feel like I'm pretty darn close with this whole jobs to be done and, customer-centric marketing, because it really, to me, feels very similar.
Yeah. And I particularly it resonated a lot with me, this idea of the pursuit of perfection. And I think, I mean, Scott has a couple of things to say. If you read his book on jobs to be done, there is a lot in there of how that relates to jobs to be done as well. Because I mean, you're in a better position to explain it, Scott, but it's kind of this. I think there is something very, very deeply human as well about it. This pursuit of perfection, of getting better, which just gives us I don't know, a sense of accomplishment, of I mean, you described it yourself, of pride and so on, which is because it seems to be something in us that we just strive for this betterness, and somehow we get a reward out of it.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the sort of foundation of jobs to be done thinking, is that people buy something because it will help them become who they want to be, right? It will help them transform themselves. And so that's the job, I think, in the arts world, is to try to figure out, what are our target audiences trying to do? What progress are they trying to make? Who do they want to be? And how can our art help them do that?
Yeah.
It's such a more fulfilling approach than saying, how can we sell more tickets?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Because how can we sell more tickets? Then you end up with the website which has 10 calls to action to buy tickets or whatever, but it's not. Yeah, I mean, that is not exclusive to the art world. If you ask the same question, how can we push more of our product? You end up with the exact same kind of marketing that just doesn't, it's not compelling. It doesn't work. It doesn't, I mean, there's so much fatigue that, that's a different story.
Oh, that's so true.
So I have a tricky question, and I just want to, I'll try and see if I can express it correctly. So I was reading a description of what a game is, I mean, how do you define a game? And the definition was something like people and why people play games. So people play games because they choose an obstacle that they're going to struggle to overcome. So it's you purposefully choose a situation in which you have obstacles and that you want to overcome, and that's part of this idea of the appeal. And Scott, sometime at the beginning of our discussion, mentioned this notion of traditions, and we've been talking about, classical music decline, etc., and maybe we need to ease some of the things that around classical music. That it's a hassle to get dressed for the event, and there's a lot of obstacles like this. And I have now in my mind an interesting tension, because on the one hand, one could argue that having these obstacles and this struggle in somehow in getting to participate, take part, consume, quote unquote, a classical performance, maybe that also could be part of the appeal in some sense. And so how can we, I'm just thinking out loud, how can we reconcile these two ideas? Okay, making the process more perfect, more with less barriers, less obstacles, more efficient, and at the same time, this idea that maybe the obstacles are part of the enjoyment of it.
I love that question, and I think it's something that is a struggle, and other people have brought this to my attention as well. Is we've got so many different types of customers. We have some customers who don't want to have to do much; they just want to sort of show up and enjoy the experience. But then we have these other customers who they want to learn something new. They want to better themselves. They want to feel like they're more cultured. They actually do want to wear something fancy, right? That's something that feels like progress to them. So maybe it comes down to how you strategize about all the extras, There's a grill company, I can't remember the name, is it Weber Grills or something, that they provide grills, but they know that the job to be done is to be really good at grilling food. And so they give, grilling lessons online, and they sell all these different sort of tools to help you be a better griller. So when it comes to the arts, maybe it has to do with adding programming where you can, there are a lot of arts organizations who offer like a pre-concert lecture. So, those types of things maybe are the things that are going to attract the people who do want to have some struggle to get to where they want to be. How does that resonate?
Yeah, that sounds really good. I don't have an answer. I'm just wondering how one can do this.
No, but it's true. I think there are certain things, also certain products, where you kind of need to find ways of educating your customer into the category. I think that is a familiar thing. I mean, there are products that are very everyday commodities and so on, but there are some kinds of niche products, or well, just products where you have to find ways of educating in at least part of your customer base, and that's a difficult thing to figure out. But
it is, because like you don't want to make them feel stupid, right? That's
exactly.
But I was thinking this week about how the wine industry has a similar problem, right? Because there are some folks who just are like, just give me whatever. But you know, there's so much nuance to wine, and it's an interesting sort of correlation, I think, when you look at those two industries.
But you know what I think? I mean, I don't know how others experience this, but if I talk to companies, somehow I get the feeling that there are people sitting in companies, and it's, I don't mean that as an offense, but they believe the exact same thing about their own products. Our customers don't get it. We are much more refined. We're much more advanced than our customers. We have such a great technology, and why don't they buy? Well, they just don't get it.
Yeah,
and I think that attitude is not that particular, to be honest. I think it's much more widespread than we might believe.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's
confession time. Me being in a jobs to be done consultant role, I am completely vulnerable to that exact same thing. Like if I'm teaching, it's like, well, I mean, I really have to stop and sort of have a conversation with myself. So it's having this sort of knowledge of jobs to be done doesn't not inoculate me from that same, because this is what I'm so, there's our ironies on top of ironies. I'm so passionate about jobs to be done. I get frustrated when other people don't immediately understand it. So I think we're all vulnerable a bit, or I am.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I find myself, you know, I've written about this for almost a year now, and I still find myself looking at maybe my blog and being like, oh, that language I used there, that's not customer centric at all, or, you know, why did I even, you know, use that image or whatever. So I think it's you have to constantly sort of check yourself to make sure you're still thinking from that customer's perspective.
I would love to get a little bit into kind of, I mean, the way I see it, or the way I experience you also on various social media, is kind of your very targeted interventions kind of into the art world. The last one, you had to bring it up and you have to explain it, the Indiana Jones kind of intervention. I want to get into a little bit into how does the art world react? What kind of feedback do you get? And maybe you could fiddle in the Indiana Jones kind of copy that you made, which I loved, by the way.
Yep. Yeah. So, you know, I'm not the first one to be talking about this, right? There have been other people that have ranted and raved about arts marketing for a long time. But I think what has been lacking is just examples of like, here's how you do it. Not here's what's wrong, but here's how to do it right. And so because I have this sort of creative side where I enjoy making videos and I enjoy, you know, doing graphic design. I'm not a pro, but I, you know, do my best. That's something that I've taken on. So when I see something that is absolutely ridiculous, I usually do a side by side and I say, here's the old way, here's the new way. Look, I fixed it. And so, you know, I had seen a couple of prominent orchestra websites that have splashed across their homepage a picture of their conductor. And, you know, if you're an outsider, so if you're an insider, let's say you're a loyalist who always attends concerts, you know who that conductor is, you know how talented they are, you appreciate why they're there. But the outsiders who I'm always thinking about, because if we're going to grow our audiences, we have to bring in the people who are not familiar with our world. They're going to see that photo and they're literally going to say, who is that ugly old white guy? I don't care. And that's a huge problem, right? So I wanted to show, okay, what would this look like in a different sector? And so it was late at night, a couple of nights ago, my husband and I were talking about this and he was like, you should put Steven Spielberg on a poster of one of his movies. It's like, all right. So I grabbed an Indiana Jones poster and I grabbed a Steven Spielberg picture and I put him there, splashed him across that poster. And we were in hysterics about it. It just was so ridiculous. You would never see that in Hollywood. And so, you know, I posted that. I said, you know, splashing a photo of your conductor across your homepage is like putting a photo of Spielberg on his movie poster. And I think, and I got a little bit of pushback on that from some of my artist friends, but I really think you have to remember the idea of relevance and context. Like I've said before, US consumers have tons of relevance for the Hollywood movie genre, for the pop stars. It's, my husband calls it preloaded context. It's just in the vernacular. It's everywhere. So they understand it, but classical music is not. And so they have very little context for that world. And of course, a conductor is important, right? But a live performance is nothing without an audience. So we have to start thinking about how we're creating doors, metaphorical doors into our offerings. And if those doors don't align with how people interact with their world, it's just irrelevant. They're going to not even give it a second glance. And I love Nina Simon's book, The Art of Relevance, which I think is very much aligned with Jobs to be Done. She comes from the museum world, but it's very applicable to all arts. And she says, when you change the ways that people can access your metaphorical space, the way that you market it, everyone benefits, because you're not transforming what's inside the room. You're not dumbing down the art. You're opening it up, and you're just changing who can actually get inside. And so, people, Jobs to be Done theory, it's all about, identifying what transformation a consumer is seeking, because people buy not because of who they are, but because of who they want to become. And in the context of live classical music, it's really, really hard for the uninitiated to imagine for themselves that an orchestra concert could help them on their journey of becoming who they want to be. There's just so many stereotypes, and they're not familiar with it. So we as arts administrators and marketers, we have to be prepared to create this relevance. That's my soapbox. And that's why, I do these fixed it little things. I'm glad you got a kick out of it, because I thought it was hilarious.
No, I mean, what I like is really this, it gives you this outside perspective, right? So the Steven Spielberg on the Indiana Jones stuff, it immediately makes you realize how ridiculous it is. But in our day-to-day stuff, we don't get this outside perspective, or it's so easily lost. And then once you see it, I mean, it's like, it's obvious that isn't the way we should be marketing our stuff. But then, so yeah, anyway, so that's why I thought it was so to the point. Like, I
had someone on Twitter comment that it actually made him want to see directors on movie posters. And I was like,
that's just being
Well, but I asked him, I said, okay, I'm curious. Are you a movie buff? Do you watch a lot of movies, and are you actually really into like who the directors are? And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, that's why it works for you.
Interesting.
You're an insider, right? You're an insider. And so, I mean, that makes sense. But we have very few insiders, and we have a whole bunch of outsiders that we have to reach. So.
Yeah, that's very nice. What was the book was The Art of Relevance?
The Art of Relevance by Nina Simon. And everyone thinks it's Nina Simone, but it's not. It's Nina Simon.
It's Nina Simon.
She also has some really fantastic TED Talks on YouTube too. But yeah, lots of talk about insiders and outsiders and how to get them in to your doors. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's the next one I'll check out if I have time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so in a sense, so there is a reaction from the art, right? People, you're kind of fun. I imagine you're hitting on a nerve, because the issue is there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I get the impression that people are interested in these ideas because it's such a different approach. I mean, there is some pushback, but my work has been mentioned on a handful of blogs. I've gotten a decent subscriber list going, and I've got a pretty good following on Facebook. I call it the Arts Marketing Hall of Fame. And so every day I post an outstanding example, because there's so much, bashing of arts marketing that happens these days. So I'm trying to really find the good examples and put it out there. And I think it is a new approach, and it resonates with a lot of people, because, arts marketing and strategy has been the same for, I don't know how many decades now. And I think, with the changes that COVID has wreaked on the performing arts world and the changes that, consumer trends are showing these days. Millennials are so different in terms of a target audience. I think people are really hungering for something new to try and a new perspective. So it does seem to be resonating.
Yeah.
I think you're in a unique position to talk about this because you're actually an artist yourself and you come from that sector. So I think people will be much more ready to listen to you than to someone who has done an MBA, let's say, or something.
Mm-hmm. Although I have to be careful not to be too harsh. I think sometimes I get a little bit too like, come on, can't you see it? But yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's just kind of what happens. I think what Jobs to Be Done is one of those things. At least that's my experience talking to people who kind of, I wanted to say got infected with, but it's kind of not the good metaphor. But kind of just once you have that lens, mm-hmm. once you kind of read or understood the concept of what it is about, you cannot put it down. It doesn't go away in a sense. At least that is my experience. I mean, I've gotten into touch with Jobs to Be Done some 10, 12 years ago, and it just never goes away. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a way of thinking or looking at stuff that you just cannot shed.
Do you find yourself like watching ads on TV and being like, oh, that's a really good customer centric approach?
Yeah.
That's what I do constantly now. Yeah.
But what's interesting is not all ads function like this, including some very good ads. Or if they do, I've not quite figured out how they actually go about thinking about them. A series of ads. I've not seen any of this company lately, but they probably still do the same. So P&G did great ads that were very much about storytelling. They had a whole series about mothers raising Olympic champions and just general sports people. And they had all sorts. They had one with girls, about girls, or maybe I'm mixing up. That was someone else. But anyway, the P&G did some great ads like this, and I don't find it that easy to pinpoint actually the job in an ad like this. So it's an interesting thing also.
Yeah, another great book that I love is The Marketing Rebellion by Mark Schaefer. I don't know if you guys have read that one. Love that
it's
book.
Up there. Yeah.
And he talks about how values-based marketing has become so popular and so powerful. And,
exactly.
and I think it has to do with, I think the number is 68% of millennials say that they are actively trying to create change in the world. And so I think companies are realizing this and are trying to tap into that. That's a job to be done, right? If you can say, oh, that company is trying to create change in the world, I'm going to buy their product because then I feel like I'm engaging in that change. I think there's something to that.
Yeah.
The product itself is not completely is in a way unrelated to that mission and that job that they're portraying in the ads themselves, which is so it's a bit of a different thing. As you mentioned, it's based on values, and it's also another interesting approach. Yeah.
Well, I think for me, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna say I've seen a commercial that recently with Matthew McConaughey for Salesforce. I don't know if you guys have seen that one where he's talking about, he's floating in a hot air balloon and he's talking about how it's time to come together. And I'm like, this is not about Salesforce at all, but it's tapping into that desire, that job to be done for these consumers who want to see change in the world and want to help create change in the world. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is kind of, so it's difficult to express it, but I think there's jobs to be done can be used for different things, right? And I think very often, at least in my experience, is that if you're thinking about, okay, I want to kind of improve an existing product, you're not in that rather, let's say, more abstract, more higher level jobs. But the more and more you move towards marketing, I think the more and more the higher level jobs, or we call them bigger whys, as it were, they kind of become much, much, much more relevant, because it's not about necessarily the kind of improving an existing product or figuring out what is the pain point when they use blah, 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 or when
functional job.
Yeah, exactly. When they try to accomplish a functional job, but kind of what is the garnish around it, as it were, that is a bit more abstract, and that is has a much higher relevance, I think, for marketing stuff. And I think it's important also to kind of to keep those two things apart, right? So do you use it for product development, which I believe tends to be much more a functional thing, and then if you go down, let's say down the funnel to the marketing, it kind of gets to the more abstract or higher level, it becomes much more relevant.
Mm-hmm.
In your ad, actually, that we were talking about previously, it's also quite a high level or abstract, quote unquote, job. So it's not really and Tony Ulwick, another big figure in the jobs to be done community, always hammers the point that, you know, you have to focus on functional jobs. And I agree that when you're talking about marketing and advertising, often you'll try and go in the more abstract, high level jobs. And that's what you did too, I in my opinion, in this ad you created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when you can create that emotional response, that is typically what prompts action. So I think that's why it becomes so important in marketing to have that emotional job, to be clear.
I agree. We're trying to figure out at the moment kind of what are good models of actually of behavioral change. Yeah. Right. And I think kind of one of the learning, I'm really at the beginning of reading through that stuff, but one of the key learnings is really that, and we kind of know this intuitively, is that rationality itself is not alone, is not enough. I'm sorry. So of course, every smoker knows that smoking is bad for them. It's not a question of information. It's not a question of, they know exactly what they're doing to themselves, but still they don't act. And then kind of what does it take in addition to get them moving, or to get them to stop smoking? Or you can also turn this positively, how kind of I don't know, get the checkup at 50, right? Why don't people do it, and so on. So a lot of these things is, I think it's only when you add an emotional component that they actually start acting on it. They actually get moving. It's kind of a question of motivation or something like that.
It's so true. And we do a lot of this kind of work at the Institute when it comes to healthcare and social determinants of health. And I'm not an expert on it, but I think it's such a huge component of healthcare, and trying to figure out what is the primary job to be done here, and how can we motivate people using that as motivation. But it's fascinating.
That's very nice. Maybe so we've been talking for, maybe I was wondering, just kind of, we've been always kind of now looking at the art world as our object, let's say, and they have to learn our jobs to be done stuff and so on. But is there a kind of a flip side to this? So does kind of the business world or so, can we learn something from the arts, or
the
jobs to be done in particular? I don't know. I mean, how can we?
Yeah, on the surface, you would think no, right? Because it's a completely different industry. But like I said before, Clayton Christensen was really well known for his storytelling. And he had, in his back pocket, a couple of stories he would always tell when he was trying to explain the theory. One was the steel mill story. The other was the milkshake story. And, he brought these, I think he has this story about how he spoke with the head of Intel, and he told him the steel mill story. And Intel went off and made like $2 billion from what they learned.
Can you maybe tell the steel mill story? I think the milkshake is more. Oh
gosh, I'm gonna let somebody else do that.
We can find it on YouTube. Though.
I'm not practiced at it, but it's the steel mill story is the story of disruptive innovation. It explains disruptive innovation and how and the milkshake story is the story of jobs to be done. Why would you hire a milkshake, for your commute? So I think what he knew, and I think it's so true, is that when you hear the theories explained in a different sector, it really can open your eyes to your own sector. I think it actually helps to hear about it in a different sector, because you realize, oh, that is happening to me too. That's happening in my world, and it helps you understand it in a deeper way. So,
yeah, I agree. That's very nice. So I don't know. How do you feel, Jonathan Scott? Are we still going strong? Ruth, how are you?
I mean, I think we cover a lot of territory. We cover a lot of ground, and we've got some great great content, in my opinion. So
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I have a question. Ruth, what's your very favorite piece of music?
Oh God.
Oh, of course I should have asked.
I used to say my favorite piece of music is the one that I'm performing right now. And I'm not really performing much at the moment, but I'm obsessed with a CD that came out a year or two ago by this composer, Jeff Blumenkrantz, and this Broadway jazz singer, Alicia Umphreys. And the CD is called I've Been Played. And it's basically, Jeff Blumenkrantz is an incredible jazz pianist and composer, and he writes beautifully for the voice. And it feels like a modern rendition of like the 1940s jazz ballads. So that's what I'm playing on repeat right now.
Are you a person that listens to the same song over and over, or like you play one and yet you have to wait a while and come back to it?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I think when it comes to movies, I never want to watch the same thing twice. But when it comes to music, I do get in a groove a little bit because I like to sing along. That's my thing. I do a lot of singing along. So if something feels great in my voice, or it's improving my mood, that's a job to be done right there. I might play it more than once. Yeah.
That's nice. I'm kind of the reverse. I don't listen that much to music, but I could watch. I mean, I can word by word. Matrix 1, I know it all.
Yeah,
I'm definitely a listen to it. If the song puts me in a certain state of mind, I sort of want to stay there. I'll drive. You don't want to ride in the car with me. I want to play it over.
I think I'm the same.
Almost without fatigue. It's really, and again, sort of circle around to how we started our conversation. Music is so mysterious. What is it? It's the frequencies going in our ears and our brains. It's not even what we think it is. Our brain is translating it into this signal. It's beyond our imagination of what it really is. It's these vibrations that our brains are processing, and we connect with each other. It's
you could actually never explain music to someone who had never experienced it, I don't think.
Oh wow, that sounds hard.
Yeah
Probably. Yeah, that's, I mean,
I read a piece about the composer Olivier Messiaen, who was in a Nazi concentration camp, and he composed while he was there, and there were a couple of musicians there, and they performed the piece that he wrote, and now it's very well known and respected. But the speaker or the writer was saying, like, how in a concentration camp you have no food, no water, you're getting beat up, your life is at risk. How do you have energy and time for art and music? And the conclusion was it's part of survival. It's part of life.
Yeah.
Oh, I so agree. This idea of the arts is something that you only care about once everything else has been. It's so wrong. So I think there's this beautiful saying by Friedrich Nietzsche where he says, life is only justified as an aesthetic phenomenon. So kind of you need music and arts and so on for survival. And I think it's just exactly that. So
I love that.
All right. I mean, hey, Ruth, thank you so much for doing this, for taking the time.
Thank you.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Oh my gosh, this is so much fun. Thank you so much.
Kind of that concludes, I believe, our Product Quest podcast for today. Send any of your comments or ideas for future shows always to productquest@gmail.com.